Hello and welcome all back to Election Time News America. Today is Wednesday, October 29th, 2025, and today we're going to be looking at the general election day, November 4th, 2025, main elections across the United States. Election Time News, your one for all things elections and politics, from summations to poll reviews and news. Subscribe below for more content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. Also, sure to follow the Substack, Threads, Instagram, and X, as well as check out our website, electiontimene.ws, linked in the description below for news feeds and our latest predictions. Also, remember, there's never a dull moment in politics. So now that we got that quick intro out of the way, what we're going to be looking at is the general overview of the elections. There are 7 ones that we're going to be looking at today. Most of those are actually focused in one state. 3 of them are in Pennsylvania. These are judge retention elections. Those are generally going to be relatively important because it can determines the control of the state court in Pennsylvania, just like how important April 1st was in Wisconsin. We're also going to be looking at the NYC election in New York. Just for the purpose of this, right now I didn't add an independent, but if Cuomo does win, then we would put that as independent. But anyway, New Jersey, Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican, versus Mikey Sherrill, the Democrat, for governor. Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, versus Winsome Earl-Sears, the Republican, for Virginia, and then the passage or not passage of Proposition 50 in California. So those are the main things that we are looking at this cycle, and all those are going to be very important on the national scale. So, to start things off, let's just get started with the gubernatorial elections. These are the big scale things this year. These are going to be the most important things. So when everyone, hops on the video, they're going to be wanting the answers for that. So start things off in Virginia, which is generally generally accepted to be the less competitive of the two. We have Winsome Earl-Sears, the current lieutenant governor, under current Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, versus Abigail Spanberger, a relatively strong House candidate from Virginia. She won the 7th district in 2018, which was quite a bit of an impressive feat, especially considering that she de-seated the incumbent Dave Bratt, PVI of R+6, which means that a generic Republican would beat a generic Democrat by 12. And so that just actually makes it even more impressive. And so it was pretty close, honestly, the whole time. It was known to be, it was going to be pretty close. All these had as a toss-up, except for stuff was crystal ball, which actually projected as a flip. But what we look at is there's no information on, let me see if I can find it somewhere, on how much Trump won the district by most recently. If we just go right here, then we can probably, there we go. And we have to look at 2016 because the districts have flipped since then. So if we look at the district that she flipped, which was the 7th, 2 years prior, Trump won it by 6 points. So she won in a district that had gone for Trump by 6 percentage points, just a bit sooner than that. So that is definitely overperformance, not to mention the fact that, again, she de-seated an incumbent. This was an R+6 seat, somewhere in there. So, again, okay, that's correct. Definitely an overperformance. She's a strong candidate, and Winsome Earl-Sears seems to be a bit subpar of a candidate from what we can tell so far. Donald Trump is not doing too well across the country either. He's now at -18, which is by far the lowest that he's ever had, and 3 percentage points lower than any point in his first term. And that's including not doing very well in Virginia, -16.7, or amongst 2024 voters, -13.9%. So that's definitely not going to help things. But Winsome Earl-Sears is doing like Glenn Youngkin did and isn't tying herself very strongly to Trump. So that's probably going to end up benefiting her in quite a few ways. And so, but we do still end up with a -11 result here. If we look at just the raw crosstabs for party representation, this is rounded because Virginia doesn't actually have registration. That's why there's tenths here, but there's not here. And these are crosstabs from a poll, a few polls there. So, 54% for Spanberger, 40.5% for Sears, and then you actually have a 13.5 point margin there, which is extremely high. Probably going to be closer to around 11. This is part of the mini model. I didn't get many more mini models in here, unfortunately, but that is going to be enough here just for a little bit. We definitely do have a bit more for the Senate, obviously, quite a few more mini models in here as well. That I've still yet to assemble a bit of it, but and then we also have the house, still have to get to work on that, still working on that. But so you can see a bit of it is still in under construction. But I'm looking at so far, again, is going to be Virginia, 11 points expected. That's quite a bit to the left. It's actually to the left of where it was even in 2017. So most likely it's going to be to the left of where it was in 2017, which would be a very impressive feat for the Democrats. But that is going to be a likely margin on the map here to start off in Virginia. Now, the more competitive of the two states is going to be New Jersey, and this is going to be potentially a bit of a surprise considering how strong of a blue state it was until it wasn't last year, and it only voted for Kamala Harris by 5.9% after it voted for Biden by 15.9% and had voted for Democrats by a considerable amount for quite a while, and actually, it voted for Obama by more in 2012 than 2008. But even Kerry won it by 6.7%, Gore by 15.5%. So the last time that it went by that low of a margin, it went to Clinton by 2.5%. So this is basically completely new territory for the Democrats they hadn't seen. However, it still had held on longer than original Clinton era blue wall states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, which of course had cracked in 2016. But it is still something to notice there. And incumbent Phil Murphy did only win re-election against Chitterelli by 3.2%. But typically, people who are running again don't generally do that well. Chitterelli appears to be a bit of an outlier in that sense. Also, he's tying himself very strongly to Trump, which right now may be a very poor decision. 27.3%, even amongst 2024 voters, is minus 17. Early vote numbers aren't looking as poor for Democrats as they were. They were looking very, very bad originally. And so, all I considered, it's still looking relatively good for Chitterelli, but not enough to push him over the finish line right now. Minus 5.8. This original mini model actually is minus 16.5. That's just probably because of how many independents there are in the state, and they're actually split for Cheryl in that poll, which I think is a bit weird. Most likely on election night, it will come out that independents broke for Chitterelli. In order for him to get anything close to the margin that he had in 2021, independents have to go for Chitterelli unless there's obscenely low Democratic turnout, in which case you could end up actually having independents going blue, but no Democrats show out. So that would be very weird. So we end up with it's about a 6 point margin here for Cheryl, which isn't necessarily anything that's, breakingly strong by any means, but it would still be a good win at the end of the night for the Democratic Party, being able to add 2 wins here to the map, which is definitely going to be a strong, considerable win nonetheless. Now to quickly get the small things out of the way. Probably the smallest one is just going to be the vote to retain these judges in Pennsylvania, or to, I believe the system is if you don't retain them, then there's another election in which you then choose new judges. There's not much polling in the way of whether or not they're actually being there's actually really not many polling. There's not really any polling done here. It's just a general guess. But we look at sorry, I'm just trying to get this up here real quick. If we look at the results from 2020, which was the last time that they ran, which I can't even find anything here. It's really not being anywhere. So, anyway, Most likely, Democrats will be able to pull off all three of these races. I mean, they're independent. They're a little bit left-leaning, but a few independent groups have given them relatively high ratings. But still, they're relatively likely to hold these by a relatively strong amount. It's an off year, and in the North, that generally benefits the Democrats. In the South, it's a little bit more towards Republicans because college-educated voters are lagging a bit in their leftward trend across the South. So and they're the ones that typically end up showing up to vote, as well as older people, which generally has also shifted to the left faster in the northern states than in the South. So both those together end up meaning that it's going to benefit Democrats up here more than anything else. They won by a relatively strong amount in 2020, but probably going to be around 8 points or so. I have to get a bit more into that, but very high single digits most likely for all three, because there's no real reason that a person would probably vote yes and then no on any of the others, or vice versa. So for that reason, they're probably going to be very, very similar in margin when it comes down to the night itself. Speaking of which, we will be live streaming, so make sure to click remind me. It's going to be up here, and then the button right at the bottom there is going to say remind me. So make sure to get ready for that. Very, very short 6 days left as a recording. So next up, we have the city of New York. So this is going to be a mayoral race in the city of New York, and what we're looking at is going to be a race between Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat, Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, and Andrew Cuomo, who lost the primary and is now running under a different ticket as essentially an independent. And things are looking very strong for the Democrats, which isn't at all unexpected in a place like New York City. And Zoran Mamdani actually received the most votes for any candidate in Democratic primary history in New York City, but that does make sense considering the fact that it was ranked choice voting, which means that there were no lost votes. So some of these that voted for Lander in a first past the post system that would have just been lost got transferred to Mamdani instead. So that's kind of how he broke the record. It's a little bit unfair to just say that he won the most votes. I think that this 469,642 actually might be also the most votes in history as well, because there was a very, very high youth turnout in this election. There's not actually as high youth turnout as of right now in early voting so far. So that is the general thing as far as that goes. But current incumbent Eric Adams has, in fact, dropped out, and so here you can actually see the string of eliminations. There were a few chain eliminations for quite a few people here until the last few, and this is going to be where those last votes came from. Lander, most of those votes, almost all of them, went to Mamdani. So what we end up with is a relatively strong overperformer. He was expected to lose potentially the original election to begin with, and so Curtis Lee was uncontested. He was the nominee in 2021, and what we're looking at here is that, he did very, very well, and so he was expected to lose the general election, win the first round. No polls had him winning the first round, and then he won the first round by 7. So to say he's an overperformer is a bit of an understatement, in my opinion there, and to expect that he's going to do a bit better than the polls is a little bit to be expected as well. These are going to be a bit of those low propensity voters here, especially not necessarily extremely low, but some of them are going to be showing up, especially youth voters who are generally a bit more, because especially with the rise of online polling, it's going to be a lot more difficult to be able to get young people with phone polling. It's going to be a lot more difficult to get young people because of the scam call resurgence and stuff like that. That's going to be no one's going to really pick up the phone to answer a poll. So that's the main difficulty as far as that goes. And so Mamdani's probably going to end up being the beneficiary of the quiet poll, but even if he's not, he's winning by enough that he will almost certainly win. So Manhattan Institute, the newest poll here, 600 likely voters, 43% for Mamdani, 28% for Cuomo, 19% for Sliwa. Eric Adams dropped out of the race, so that 1% is just very, very stubborn. And so the select pollster, which is from NYT rating things, which includes their own pollster, which is, a bit much, especially considering that they're not the best pollster, um, has 44, 34 to 11. So that's a 10-point lead. This is actually way further than that. That's quite a bit more to Sliwa, interestingly enough. Suffolk University is relatively reputable. And we look at this is generally a rough estimate. This would be with probably about one, I believe, one and a quarter million voters showing up. This is probably roughly about where it'd be, with rough county by county estimates inside of the city as well. So Slee was probably going to end up winning Richmond County, that's Staten Island, but then all the other boroughs, Manhattan as well, Queens and Kings counties, as well as Bronx County up here, which actually did, I believe, went to Cuomo by 18, is probably still going to actually end up going to Mamdani, but not by as much. You can generally tell that they prefer Cuomo, so potentially even a bit less than that, but still, he's going to probably end up winning by a good bit, and he's actually probably going to outperform Cuomo even on like Richmond County, because there were a few polls that definitely actually showed that even conservatives preferred Mamdani to Cuomo. And so that's probably going to end up meaning a bit when you get to moderates on areas like Staten Island and similar regions of the country, of the city. But that it would in fact be a narrow, not really majority win there. More would in fact be voting against him, but he would win narrowly. So that's still going to be an interesting race to watch, but it's almost certain at this point that he is going to win, and by quite a bit over 12. Even some of the closer polls, 13, 11, 10 for Suffolk University here. I think it's going to be a little bit more than that, right around 12 points at the end of the night. Probably going to be around like 47% sounds about right. Don't think it's going to be 16 for Sliwa. It's going to be, more for Cuomo. But Patriot Polling is basically just a bunch of college freshmen. Done with Fox News, relatively strong pollster, interestingly enough, 52%, 28%, 14%. This seems about right. That'd be a 24-point margin, though. I don't think it's necessarily going to be that high. It's probably going to be closer to about 30% or so for Cuomo at least. He's probably going to break 30%. He might end up actually not, depending on how extremely well Mamdani does end up doing on election night. So that's the entire East Coast so far, and then California. So this one is going to be another 12-plus point win for the Democrats, meaning that they will actually end up having a complete sweep as of our current projections. And so that is definitely going to be good news for the Democrats, obviously. But the closest race is going to be in New Jersey, so that's definitely going to be one to watch. And Chattarelli could absolutely pull it off. It'd be pretty impressive if he did, as of right now. But it'd probably be pretty darn close. Might be lean margin, be like it'd almost certainly be under 3. But as of right now, Cheryl is, in fact, still leading there, but by a slowly slimming amount. It was just over 6 points just the other day. So, California, going to be a double-digit margin there. California's Trump approval is absolutely in the garbage. 34.3% disapproval rating. That means that people who approve of Trump in the state of California are outnumbered 2-1. And so if we look at this poll, for example, this was a poll done by Emerson College, who, isn't necessarily the greatest. All colleges are, they're getting into the industry, and while they're not, generally all trash, they're not, the highest level of pollster quality out there. By the Democrats, generally, shocker, they don't approve of Trump. But the interesting thing is that if we look down at the Proposition 50, use new congressional maps, that's going to be approved. 81.3% of Democrats approve of Proposition 50, 13.5% disapprove, 5.2% are undecided. That's almost enough just to win by itself. But here's the 17.8% of Republicans say yes. 52.2% of independents say yes on Prop 50. 38.3% say no. This number would have to be at least flipped with an 80% approval rating for Democrats in order for this to be even close to losing. The Republicans have completely pulled out all funding for it about a week away from the election. It is almost completely certain to pass at this point. The odds are probably over 90% almost everywhere. These would have to be at least flipped. You have to see almost these numbers backwards for the independents in order for it to work, just based on the registration numbers in the state of California. And so with this total top line of 57.5 to 36.8, 5.7% undecided, and based on these undecideds, you can see that basically they split 50-50. So, I mean, a little bit more towards no, but still basically 50-50. So even from that, then you'd end up with a slightly lower margin than that. But that's still passing with flying colors. I mean, that's more than 61%, 61.5 to 38%. That's barely, that's right around how much Newsom won his recall election by 4 years ago. So we'd be saying right about there as far as the electorate goes, which would be relatively interesting. Newsom plus 23.7, that'd be roughly what we're looking at here, about 24 points, which is double a required safe margin here. That's probably the safest race now in the entire country that's showing up, other than, maybe Boston mayor or some other mayoral election, which we will again be going over. We'll be quickly noting on some of those on election night, which is coming up pretty soon. We'll not be doing any focusing on them, no projections for them, but we will be going over the mainstream projections for them and whatnot. So make sure to sign up for that already. And so that does mean that Democrats would win every single one of the 7 contests. If I had to pick which one's the most likely to flip, again, that would definitely be New Jersey. Jack Chiarelli could pull off a surprising upset here. He came in very close in 2021. The polling has been going back and forth between who's actually in the lead. But in the end, I think that he's probably going to narrowly end up doing worse than he did, because you end up having a new candidate or Republicans in the White House, and New Jersey tends to swing the other way, except for 2021, going all the way back to 1988. And so second would definitely be Virginia, then's going to be Pennsylvania, then New York, then California. Basically, their expected margin backwards. So that is going to be it for today. This actually was quite a bit shorter than probably expect for a quick summation of everything, but it's just meant to be a quick summation. I'll do a complete analysis of everything along with the election night simulation video that will be coming out the day before election day, I want to say. Gonna be the 3rd. On Friday, there's a video that is coming out on the municipal elections in Quebec, and then on the 3rd, we're going to have that final prediction video along with the explanation video as well, and then we're going to be just doing some quick wrap-up stuff on the 5th. Election night on November 4th, we are going to be live streaming, so again, make sure to get notified about that. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Make sure to leave any information you have, any opinions, anything. Stay respectful and courteous, please, in the comments. If you like the video, let me know what you think. Any ideas you have, anything like that, please do, again, let me know. And have a fantastic rest of your day. And if you can, go vote.